It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. Welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guests today are a couple of the most passionate advocates of responsible food production that I've ever met. I met them this past March at Commodity Classic, and they come from different companies, different backgrounds, and have joined forces on the Growing Matters Coalition. Today, I'd like to introduce Caydee Savinelli, Stewardship Team and Pollinator Lead for Syngenta, and Jeff Smith, Industry and Government Relations for Valent. Welcome, guys, and thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
So first of all, let's start by each of you telling me a bit about your backgrounds. So Caydee, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm an entomologist by training. So in other words, I went to school to study insects and bugs and everything. And my parents are still shaking their heads about that. And I've worked in the crop protection industry for almost 39 years this year. And it's mainly on the pesticide side of it. I've worked in product development as well as stewardship for the last 10 years. And I really like being on the stewardship side because it allows us to work across a lot of companies, as you'll hear today, on some common issues. So these are non-competitive issues. They're really, as an industry, we're trying to join forces and really do it for the better good.
Yeah, and I'm actually a weed scientist by training. And I've been in this industry 25 years now. It's hard to believe, but I spent the first part of my career working in retail locations, actually recommending fertilizer and pesticide products. And then I moved into research, and I did research for 16 years with Valent. So I was responsible for developing a lot of the products that growers use and interfacing with the universities and extension agents about how to use our products. And then the last 9 years, I have been in government and industry relations, where I'm working on protecting freedom to operate. And one of the great things about this job is I do get to interact across other companies that would normally be competitors, but we have issues and goals that are very aligned. So it's great to work with people like Caydee on a day-to-day basis that I would never have gotten to do in my previous job.
I'm so glad to hear that, because not everybody says they're happy to work with me. No, and one other thing I want to say is I think Jeff and I and others that we work with in Growing Matters, our passion is really for not only pollinators, but also for farmers. We want to make sure farmers have the right tools. And so I think every single day I have a conversation with somebody about how important it is for farmers to be able to have tools and for us to really recognize how important they are for not only our work, but also for the greater good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so tell me about Growing Matters and its relationship with Syngenta, with Valent, and with these other companies.
I'll start. I think I was one of the founding members of Growing Matters. And so in 2000, I'm trying to think back 10 years ago, in 2013, Growing Matters was formed as a coalition really to look at the benefits of neonicotinoids for farmers and also for ornamentals and landscape. And this whole study that took place, and it was an external study, was really both across the United States and Canada. There was a lot of discussions, both face-to-face with end users, as well as surveys, research studies, really just to see what the world would look like if we didn't have neonics. And as it turns out, the world would look a lot different because a lot of the really important pests like whiteflies that transmit diseases would not be controlled very effectively. We would probably have major yield losses as well. So I think that's where we all came together. And then since then, we've expanded into really, we work on a lot of different issues, including pollinators, of course. And that's where BeSure came from.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great coalition. I think neonics were a reduced risk pesticide, and there was a lot of requests from EPA about data, and we wanted to prove that the products were extremely important. And as Caydee said, what would happen in the absence of it, in order to protect that access for growers to have those tools in their portfolio. And then also, in addition to what Caydee just said about pollinators, we're also thinking about evolving into other issues like endangered species. It's a great communication platform and really unique across the industry to where we can have companies like this come together and work on common issues. So as Caydee said, it started with neonics, but it's quickly evolving into other things like BeSure and also endangered species.
Oh, that's great. And what's the main mission of the BeSure campaign?
So we say BeSure because it has an exclamation point after that. So BeSure is really about making sure when farmers, applicators, golf courses, et cetera, are using the products that they're using them correctly, according to the label. And also if there are any, potential, let's say spills or something else, there's mitigations in place. So I was asked yesterday, why do we do it every year? It's like everything. We have to be reminded constantly to do these things. And it's been, we're in year number 5 of the BeSure campaign. I think it's been very successful. We started in the upper Midwest and the I states. So in case some people, Iowa, Indiana, and Illinois, plus Minnesota. And this was really around seed treatment. That was our pilot year. And then since then, we've expanded across the United States and we include a lot of different other uses. So I think really just reminding people how to use products and the way we, get out the messaging, a lot of it's through radio and more, listening for farmers because farmers and applicators, because a lot of them listen to the radio a lot. And so this is a good chance for them to hear us. And I've even met people and they go, I heard you last week on the radio. It's kind of embarrassing, but yeah. And Jeff, do you have what else about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times growers or industry people think that companies like ours we create products, we put them out for sale, and all we care about is the sale of our products. And that's simply not true. I mean, the label is the most important thing that we do, but the stewardship component is so critical to all of our companies, and getting that word out and making sure there's follow through on reading the label is very critical to us, because if you don't follow the label, that's where we run into trouble in our industry. So, again, it's about collaboration across companies and getting the word out.
And who in particular is involved in this campaign? Many companies, right?
Yeah, I have the list. I just want to make sure I don't forget anybody. So Syngenta, obviously, Valent, obviously, BASF, Bayer, Mitsui, who represents a number of registrants, and also PBI Gordon and Gowan. So we have a number of companies, that are out there that are, and, it's not just the BeSure campaign that's promoting the messages, even internally and through different social media. We're also doing it as a company-wide basis too.
Great. And what are some examples of the tools you offer for farmers?
Jeff, you want to take a shot at it?
For the tools, so, seed treatments are one of the most important products we offer to growers. The neonics are very critical as a base component of seed treatments for insect management. We also offer foliar products for use in specialty crops, row crops. So again, neonics are very critical in that they are a more selective product. So you can apply it and don't have as much impact on beneficial insects. You can use them in rotation. They're an important mode of action in IPM, or resistance management. So they are critical that way. And also just to make note that even though the Growing Matters and the BeSure campaign is kind of started and focused on neonicotinoids, the practices that we promote and bring awareness to can be applied across any pesticide product on the market today. So it's not just about those particular products. Best management practices, resistance management, those are all practices that apply across all of our products in our companies.
Yeah. In my job, I'm part of the Insecticide Resistance Action Committee too. So, we wear a lot of different hats, but I mean, they're all kind of tied together.
And so when you bring up neonics, it has become kind of political. Can you outline the main debates or issues when it comes to neonic issues? And I don't think the debates are within the industry so much as to the general public. Like, for example, in Canada, this has been a hot topic for years, one that a lot of lobbyists have really leveraged and put farmers in a tough spot. So can you kind of outline that for anybody that might not know?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So sure. A number of years ago, there was a major bee kill, and it was, nobody really knew the answer. They called it a colony collapse disorder. And so immediately, because neonicotinoids are used so widely, fingers were pointed in the direction of neonics without necessarily having the scientific research. And we have done extensive scientific studies before the products are registered and even after the products are registered. So for example, and Canada, I can't speak to Canada as much as the U.S., but for example, U.S. EPA, and I think it was 2014, came out with a whole new pollinator assessment. And it was driven by the neonics, but we're doing it across all the actives right now. And it's really looking at pollinators from in the lab. So, honeybee larvae, once you take them out of the beehives, it's harder to study, but we were able to do that. So we look at honeybees, not only the adults, but also the immatures. Then there's the next step where we're looking more at pollen and nectar and what are pollen and nectar that's in various plants depending on the applications. And so that way we can say, okay, this particular use, and we have a couple of uses that say, this use will have more, problems with pollen and nectar. So you have like a 5-day window on either side of, let's say, flowering. So you're not using the product. So on all of our labels, it says do not use during flowering, which is really important. But I do want to point out, and I think a lot of people are not aware of this, and I've gone in front of a lot of farmer audiences and also seed treatments. All the work that we've done, and this goes across all the companies who have seed treatment uses, as it turns out, seed treatments are considered to be low risk by the EPA when it comes to pollen and nectar. Now, keep in mind, EPA is a regulatory body. As far as they're concerned, there is no such thing as no risk. Low risk is as good as you get. And so really when people are saying, oh, honeybees that are, let's say, feeding on, let's say, soybeans or other crops that are attractive to them could potentially have some problems from the seed treatment, the answer is really no. And I think people really need to understand that. But I think also I think sometimes the headlines take over, the actual fact. And I remember a study that came out a couple of years ago. It was out of University of California. And, we work with communications managers, and it was neonics are causing colony collapse. That was the headline. That was the actual article. But once you read the results and discussion, the funny thing is it was the first line. So I explained to our communications manager, when you get calls, just read them the first line. And basically it said, if bees are well fed, honeybees are well fed, the neonics are not causing them problems. And so like humans, if we're well fed or, sleep well, get all the things we need to do, our likelihood of catching some of these diseases is certainly less. But, feeding is very important. Care is very important. So we've done a lot of work. We're defending our registrations through additional regulatory. We're going through re-registration right now, which is every 15 years in the United States. Every 15 years, we have to go through re-registration and ensure that all the studies are up to date. So yes, it's a political issue. Yes, people really are attracted to it. But at the same time, I think, I can stand very tall and say, firm, good science says it's not the issue people make it out to be.
Right.
And I'll speak to the political side. That's kind of what I do. So yeah, Caydee's right. It started with colony collapse disorder, but from a political standpoint, it kind of originated in the EU. Around neonics, and they were singled out and targeted because EU's pesticide assessment is more of a hazard-based type or precautionary principle approach, where they just simply look at hazard and not exposure. And so they just have a general anti-pesticide sentiment over there. And it triggered a lot of media outbreak and backlash, which trickled into our politics here in the US and Canada. And over the last 10 years or so, probably even a little bit longer, we have had legislative bodies in states, also at the federal level, seeking to ban neonics or seeking to ban the use of neonics as seed treatments. And really, if you look at the science backs us that these are precision-based, safer, reduced risk products compared to chemistries, older type chemistries. But it just simply has gotten lumped into sharing the bulk of the blame when it doesn't. So USDA will say that the biggest problem with these is mites. Mites and pesticides are a very small part of the issue, but yet they tend to take the majority of blame on the political level. So we as an industry are constantly working with state legislators and federal congressional leaders about the truth behind neonics and making sure that they don't move forward with policies that try to remove or ban them. So, that's it.
All right. Those are excellent. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And that's like I said, as we started off looking at the benefits, because EPA will look at both risks and benefits. It's not just the risk part of the hazard part of it. So really that's the key to a lot of what we're just talking about. So yeah, I agree that, is it easy every day? Not necessarily, because people blame us for a lot of things, but, I also feel like we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all great points. And you touched on this before, but what if neonics were banned completely? What is the other side, in terms of yield, cotton, soybean, corn, but also on what the alternative would be?
Well, let me talk I'll give you two examples. I'm going to do a more general one, and I'm going to talk about a personal one. So, neonics are really good, and this may be a little bit technical, but there's what they call sucking insects. So it's basically the way they get their food sources. They pierce like with a needle into the plant and pull out the juice. Well, a lot of these insects, like aphids and whiteflies, will also transmit diseases. And so it's not the actual insect damage that's the cause. It's really the disease. And in a lot of cases, the economic threshold level, which farmers do pay attention to, is zero because, and then I'm going to go to the personal example. So Asian citrus psyllid, which is not native to the United States, you know that in Florida. My grandfather used to have an orange grove in Fort Pierce. Luckily, he didn't have to live through all this, but Asian citrus psyllid somehow found its way into the United States. It carries a disease. It's called greening disease. And so farmers, or citrus growers used to be able to have their trees for like 50, 75 years, long time. And now if you get 15 years, you're lucky. And so even just, regrowing trees, transplanting. And the other problem is once the tree is infected, it drops its leaves earlier. The fruit quality is not as good. And keep in mind, in Florida citrus, it's more for juice, but still the juice has an off flavor. So these products are very important. And because neonics work so well against some of these major insect pests that transmit diseases, that's why without them, we would probably be buying all our juice oranges from Brazil and places like that. And then you have a major part of the Florida industry that's now hurt because it's not just the growers, it's the truckers, it's the juice packing plants, it's everybody in the community that it hurts. So it's really important to keep these products on the market just to sustain the viability of these farmers.
And I'll speak to other pests, invasive pests. So neonics are very critical. So Caydee just mentioned one, the Asian citrus psyllid, but there's several across the country that without neonics would lead to a lot of economic disaster. One is the woolly adelgid, which attacks the hemlock trees in the forest. So if you go up to North Carolina and you see the tall trees that are kind of dying in there, those are probably due to the woolly adelgid. So that's tree injections, very safe, very targeted, precise type application for neonics is used to control that pest. The spotted lanternfly is a new pest that has come into the U.S. and is attacking multiple hosts. Neonics have been needed for that. Emerald ash borer is another pest that attacks ash trees that, especially in the north, has decimated those trees for a long time. Again, neonics are critical for managing that. So and there's other pests that we're not even mentioning that if you took neonics out, you would have a hard time, because really the only thing left, we talked a little bit earlier about the resistance management. There's only so many classes of chemistry out there from a foliar aspect. And if you take neonics away, you're going to be relying on one or two classes of chemistry. And, history has shown that insects adapt quickly. And if you can't rotate at least three effective modes of action, you're probably going to reduce the effectiveness of the other two remaining very quickly. So it's not just their control, but it's their part they play in an overall resistance management program.
Right. That's really important.
And if I might, I have one more story to tell. I love telling stories about seed treatments in Europe. So, we started to touch a little bit about Europe. So, Europe decided to essentially ban seed treatments, outdoor uses. And everyone's like, well, seed treatments, they don't need them. They're not necessary. It's prophylactic and everything. And as an entomologist, I watch insect populations, and usually when they're being controlled, you don't see them. So people think they don't exist. Right. But I was really surprised in Europe after 1 year for the, they call it oilseed rape over there, but it's canolas in the United States. But after 1 year, they started having early season flea beetle damage. And this flea beetle damage will literally take out the entire plant. And so basically what's happened is they've had to spray more often and, run across the field more times and spray, because it's not like the insects come in, you have different ones coming in. And there's been a lot of good arguments, I think, that I've been reading about recently, that when you think about climate change and you think about trying to reduce some of these pressures from, going across the field using fuel, et cetera, seed treatment's going to actually benefit climate change, because now you're not having to go across the field 2 or 3 times. And going back to what Jeff was saying, they're using certain chemistries that they need later on in the season. So number one, you've run out of the total amount you can use. And then number two, now because of the increased pressure by using these chemistries multiple times, you could have resistance. So I think Europe is a really classic example of what happens when they ban them, because otherwise people think, well, they're not working because we don't see anything. Well, they are working. You just don't see the insect damage.
Right. Yeah.
It's called unintended consequences, and our politicians frequently experience them, and we have to point those out. And unfortunately, sometimes they have to experience them personally. And in fact, I think, Caydee, correct me if I'm wrong, they actually had to allow some neonic use through emergency exemption. So they had to actually backtrack on their ban to try to control the pest in the canola.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the pests are going to go away if you take these products away. You're still going to have to control them. And, what are you going to use? So the consequences of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully our politicians can learn from other places and not repeat the same mistakes. And that brings me to today, it's just this increasing divided world that we find ourselves in, right? We see claims on all sides about sustainability, climate action, greenwashing. It's really hard to make a clear distinction between marketing and reality. And to me, as a person in marketing my whole life, especially in agriculture, that's what I see it as. It's marketing and reality. And what I do know is that the vast majority of producers strive to be good stewards of the earth. And so why is it so important to practice proper stewardship as a producer?
I think a lot of the producers are already practicing good stewardship. Mm-hmm. I think what we're running across, and, Jeff and I were talking earlier about some mitigations for runoff. I think they're not getting enough credit. And I also think I don't want to say they're not telling their story, because they've been doing these things for so long. This is just the right thing to do. It's kind of like putting your seatbelt on. It's the right thing to do. Plus you could get a ticket, but I mean, you're doing that because it's the right thing to do. And I think farmers and producers do a lot of these things, but they're not necessarily getting credit. And the average person thinks that they're out spraying every single day for every single pest they see. And I think that's not true. So I think part of it is really lack of knowledge. I think everybody feels like they're an expert in everything. I don't. But I think a lot of people just read one thing and they say, well, farmers only did this. But my contention has been all along is, if you really think farmers should do something, why not go out and try to be a farmer for a year or two and see what you're really facing, and then come back and say, okay, these are some things that could be, modified. But just to without having been on a farm and saying this is what farmers should do, I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, try telling a fifth generation farmer that they're not sustainable, right? I mean,
Right.
I think that they're always doing the right thing, and I think Caydee hit it well off. I think a lot of general consumers see American Gothic when they think of farmers. They're just wearing overalls. They're not implementing technology. And I think once they actually get into understanding exactly how farmers operate and the technology that we're now applying through, whether it be equipment or precision applications like seed treatments, seed and spray sprayers, all the technology that we're doing, plus all the regulation that growers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. We're not even talking about pesticide. I mean, talking about food safety, all the things that specialty crop growers have to deal with from a regulation standpoint day to day. These folks are doing a really just amazing job of delivering food and fiber to this country. And a lot of times they just get very little credit for it. And to be called unsustainable or, just randomly or throwing out pesticides on crops that don't need it, it's just simply not true. I mean, pesticides cost money. They're not going to apply things that cost them money, one, that don't effective, and two, that aren't needed. So I just think it's a misunderstanding. And I think that's what BeSure and other type campaigns can do, is just bring more awareness to what growers are going through right now. So you're going to see a lot more of that within endangered species discussions coming up in the future.
Yeah. And speaking of technology, sorry, I'm going to just transition. We can talk about technologies in a lot of different ways. I'll start with seed treatment. So seed treatment technology is quite amazing. Syngenta has a whole seed treatment site up in Minnesota, where when we treat the seeds, it's not just putting the chemical on the seeds. There's also coatings and advanced coatings that we test very thoroughly to make sure there's no dust. We look at it in cold storage, hot storage. We look at it through equipment. And so there's a lot of good technology that goes into seed treatments that I think most people are not aware. And I've been around long enough. I've been around for more than 30 years. But, seed treatments used to be, you take the container with a stick and you'd, put it in the seed containers when you're getting ready to plant, and then, mix it around. That was seed treatment. Today, it's very, very, very sophisticated. It's a very small amount for every individual seed. And this is not just corn and soybeans. This is vegetable seeds, everything. So I think that's the part of it. I think the other part, which I really found completely fascinating, even though I know nothing, is all the equipment. So we have newer equipment today, as Jeff alluded to, see and spray. So they see a weed in the field and spray. So it's very precise. There's very good precision agriculture in terms of when aerial applicators go over, they know exactly by GPS coordinates where they are. There's, great nozzles that are out. There's these air induction nozzles that have less drift. So there's so much technology, even in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years that, we were even not even talking about before, that's just coming out. And I think people don't realize how much technology goes into farming these days, and it's going to continue. And even, I was once in a tractor, this a few years ago, but the tractor was GPS. And when it got to the end of the turn row, it turned itself. So it was a self-driving tractor. Amazing, really. I couldn't believe it because I'm thinking I'm going to fall off. But I was inside a cab. But still, it's just amazing, all the technology. And I think the technology is wonderful, and it really does help better use our products, but also, do more precision farming.
Yeah, it's really amazing how far we've come. And education to the general public is crucial for the crop protection industry, I would say, especially. What steps can we all take to help this initiative of educating?
Well, we can first, for education, we can just get the word out and just try to, work with our peers and our friends and to try to explain a lot of the things we just talked about. But from a BeSure standpoint, we really, it starts with the label and just reading the label, understanding the label, the information that's on the label, all the restrictions to protect pollinators, human health, anything that's needed to protect those non-target organism or non-target species is on there. So first and foremost, we want to stress, and that's what the purpose of BeSure is, to start with the label, read the label frequently. Labels are updated. So make sure you're reading the most recent label and just simply read and follow, because all the work's been done for you. All you need to do is just follow the directions.
Yeah. And I used to write labels, and I tried to write them so they're pretty simple with bullet points too, so they're not too complicated to read, because sometimes it's like too much words. So I think that's also case. Even storage, handling, what to do with used seeds after you're done. So yeah, read the label is really important. The BeSure campaign is emphasizing that, but then there's also things out, that are not on the label. So for instance, if you have a seed spill, cover that up. Know where the beekeepers are. Have some conversations with the beekeepers when you're going to do a practice. Make sure the beekeepers are aware. They can either do something with their hives, cover them up, some move them, some not so much, but have that relationship so that it's kind of a collaboration, and it's because sometimes the beekeepers want to put their bees where the farmers are growing crops, and the farmers are more than happy to do that. And then they might share honey with them at the end of the season. So it's really, it's like being neighborly and doing the right thing. And I'll just give you one quick story. My neighbors have these two little dogs, they're the cutest dogs ever, but they get out all the time. And so yesterday, with all this construction going on, there's these dogs running around the street. So we took them back to the neighbor's house. So I think being neighborly is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And as producers spray their crops this season, what reminders would the Growing Matters Coalition like to share with farmers and applicators? Any advice going forward?
Yeah, well, just before I answer that, I just want to go back to what Caydee just said about partnerships and collaborations. So Caydee and I are both part of another program called Field Watch, which is another national stewardship type program that and has a component called Bee Check. So that's simply notifying or letting applicators know where beehives are so that they can notify for our applications. Okay. So that's a really good way to enhance communication between beekeepers and growers. But also California has one called BeWare. It's very similar to the Field Watch Bee Check program. So, and I was talking about Florida, I was in a meeting one time right when this Asian citrus psyllid was really hitting the growers. And there was really a lot of animosity between citrus growers and beekeepers in the state of Florida because they simply were not communicating. And it was almost looked as a property rights situation where I heard a grower say, you let your bees come on uninvited to my property and you steal my nectar and then you take it off and then you blame me for how I grow my citrus. So it was a very contentious time. And I think that, like Caydee said, over time, the communication platforms that we've created in these states has kind of taken some of that animosity away and allow for a better relationship between beekeepers and growers. So. Mm-hmm. And then, read and follow the label, obviously, but there's information in there about drift reduction. So, drift, keeping the application where it's supposed to be. Right. Caydee talked about the precision ag component of seed treatment, so they're actually putting it where it needs to be. But then all the things that they're doing with lubricants and the new equipment to prevent dusting off. Growers could go around the field edges and take out any blooming plants that might be attractive to pollinators so that they're not could not be potentially exposed to a treatment. Following the labels in terms of buffers, using the right pressure, the right course droplet sizes, right nozzles, just simply following those best management practices on the label is the first step. And I think goes a long way to making sure that non-target organisms are not impacted.
Very good. Caydee, anything else to add?
Yeah, one other thing I love talking about nozzles and stuff, but I was talking to someone the other day about, easy things for farmers to do. And it was something someone brought up, drift retardant agents, and we have that on our label. So if there is wind and it's well known, then you put a drift retardant agent there too. So it keeps the product really on the crop that you're spraying. And so that's very important. And some of these things, like I said, they're simple. Farmers know about them. Crop consultants know about them. It's just, just reminding people that, under these circumstances, do the right thing.
Yeah, great points. So I have one last question for each of you. Why do you serve the ag industry, and what's your greatest passion in all of this?
Well, I like to eat. So, I believe I've always loved farmers. I did not come from a farming background. but I've always had a romantic view of farmers. And when I got the chance to interact and work with them, it just solidified my belief that they're some of the best people on the planet. They care about the environment. They get up in the morning. They take all the risk. They put their heart and soul into their farm. They deal with the regulation. They deal with the backlash. They deal with the cost. They deal with everything. But yet they go home at night feeling, I've never felt better going home at night than I have working on a family farm. And it's really like, I just love that feeling, and I love what they do in producing food and fiber. And we've got a growing population. We're going to have to do a lot more growing on less acres with less resources, technology. We got to come together and understand that we can't create niches. We have to understand that sustainability is taking all tools in the marketplace and applying them to produce more food on less land. So that's kind of what my best definition of sustainability is, just growing more with less and preserving that for generations.
Yeah. And my passion probably started when I was really young, because like I said, my grandfather had an orange grove in Florida, and he actually came from Italy. And when he retired, that's when he went into farming. He always wanted to be a farmer. So I grew up, going to the farm, looking at things, just thinking this is just so great. And he would teach me all these things. And then I took a course in college. It was an entomology course. And I knew right then and there I could marry my love of insects, which most people say, you love insects. I really do love insects, to the point that, even though I work for a pesticide company, I don't want to kill all of them. I want to just kill the ones or control the ones that are of a problem. But when I took this course, I said, I knew exactly, I was probably like 19 years old. I said, I'm going to be an entomologist that works in farming. And I have been more than fortunate over the years to be able to live out my passion. And, I still to this day, I work a lot with pollinators and things. And so I work on different pollinator plots, and I try to educate people about the benefits of pollinators, as well as just appreciating some of the things that are out there in nature that I think a lot of people overlook. So every day I wake up, I'm happy. I love this job. I love this industry. Like I said, I've been in for almost 39 years, and I've never doubted my decision, and been very fortunate to be able to continue in that, because not everybody has this good fortune.
And I think, just to add on what Caydee said, I think she and I both wake up every morning enjoying the fact that we get to go to work, and our job specifically helps growers have access to their livelihood. And it's not just about selling products for us, it's about keeping growers sustainable. So it's a great feeling. It's one of the best jobs I've had because of the grower interaction and working across the industry on issues like collaborations like BeSure and Growing Matters. So
yeah, it's a balance. It's a balance between protecting species and farming. And I think that balance could be reached. I think sometimes people say, oh, it's industrial farming, but I think we're very good at what we do as far as farming and everything, and we're very productive. And so I think we need to have that based on the population size. As Jeff mentioned, it's getting bigger every year. But I think we can reach a balance. I don't think it's impossible. And I think we should just strive for that every day.
Yeah, I love that. And where can people find you guys?
www.growingmatters.org/BeSure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeff and Caydee, for joining me today. Great conversation. And like I said at the beginning, I love your passion. I loved it when I met you guys at Commodity Classic, and just so happy that you could join me here.
Well,
it's been great talking to you, Chris. Yeah, we appreciate your passion. Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want to learn more, the links are provided in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram channels. The podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day. Our newest podcast by North American Ag is called What Color is Your Tractor? The stories behind the ag brands you love and the ag brands you love to hate. Hosted by me, Chrissy Wozniak. We take a deep dive into the companies that have built modern agriculture. Subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Go to whatcolorisyourtractor.com. Available on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.